A major development is unfolding beneath the South China Sea that could reshape regional geopolitics. Recent seismic surveys suggest the discovery of substantial oil and gas reserves in waters claimed by the Philippines. If confirmed, these deposits could be worth hundreds of billions of dollars and fundamentally change the country's energy future. For a nation that imports 90% of its petroleum needs, this represents a potential game changer. Filipino families currently pay high fuel prices due to import dependence, while the government spends billions annually on energy purchases. This discovery could alter that reality entirely. But there's a critical complication that makes this situation far more complex than a simple energy find. These potential reserves sit in some of Asia's most contested waters, where territorial disputes have simmered for decades. Here's what we know so far about this significant development. Exploration activities have identified what appear to be massive hydrocarbon deposits in Philippine-claimed waters. Early geological assessments suggest reserves that could supply the country's energy needs for decades while generating substantial export revenues. To put this in perspective, the Philippines currently spends approximately $8 billion annually importing oil and gas. This money leaves the economy instead of funding schools, hospitals, or infrastructure projects. Domestic energy production could redirect these funds toward national development priorities. For ordinary Filipinos, the implications are tangible. Reduced energy imports could mean lower fuel prices, more stable electricity costs, and increased government spending on public services. Local communities near potential drilling sites could see new employment opportunities and economic development. However, this is where the situation becomes more complex, as the location of these reserves introduces serious geopolitical considerations. To understand why this discovery matters beyond economics, we need to examine the South China Sea's strategic importance. This waterway serves as a critical artery for global commerce, handling roughly 30% of international maritime trade worth approximately $5 trillion annually. For the Philippines specifically, these waters represent essential economic lifelines. Thousands of Filipino fishermen depend on these areas for their livelihoods, continuing family traditions that span generations. Major shipping lanes connect Philippine ports to international markets, making maritime access vital for the country's trade-dependent economy. The region's strategic value extends far beyond fishing and shipping. These sea lanes connect major Asian economies with global markets, making navigation rights a matter of regional influence and economic security. Control over these waters affects everything from trade flows to military positioning. This is where geopolitical reality becomes unavoidable, as multiple nations maintain competing claims over the same areas where oil has potentially been discovered. The discovery's potential impact on Philippine energy security requires careful analysis. Energy dependence creates economic vulnerability and limits foreign policy options. Countries that import most of their energy face price volatility, supply disruptions, and persistent trade deficits. Currently, the Philippines faces these exact challenges. Rising global oil prices directly impact transportation costs, electricity generation, and manufacturing expenses. This affects everything from jeepney fares in Manila to industrial production costs throughout the archipelago. Domestic energy resources could provide strategic independence. Nations with reliable energy supplies maintain greater flexibility in international relations and reduced exposure to external economic pressures. They can also develop energy-intensive industries and attract investment in manufacturing sectors. But control over these resources is the key issue, and this is where territorial disputes become directly relevant to energy security planning. China's position on South China Sea territorial claims is comprehensive and well-established. Beijing's 9-dash line encompasses approximately 90% of the sea, including areas that overlap significantly with Philippine exclusive economic zones under international maritime law. China has demonstrated its commitment to these claims through substantial infrastructure development. This includes constructing artificial islands on disputed features, establishing military installations, and maintaining regular Coast Guard patrols throughout the region. Recent incidents illustrate the practical implications of these competing claims. The 2012 Scarborough Shoal standoff resulted in Chinese control over traditional Filipino fishing grounds. Ongoing tensions at Second Thomas Shoal involve regular confrontations between Chinese and Philippine vessels, affecting local fishing communities and supply missions. Beijing consistently maintains that historical records and international law support its territorial claims. However, the Philippines argues these waters fall within its exclusive economic zone under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. And this is what makes the situation sensitive, as both parties have legitimate reasons to assert control over potential energy resources in these areas. When significant natural resources are involved, territorial disputes typically intensify. Energy resources represent long-term strategic assets that nations are generally unwilling to compromise on, particularly when domestic energy security is at stake. Historical precedents from other regions demonstrate how resource competition can escalate existing tensions. The combination of territorial disputes and valuable energy deposits creates conditions where miscalculation or unintended escalation becomes more likely. The South China Sea situation presents particular risks because multiple parties maintain competing claims backed by significant military and economic capabilities. Both China and the Philippines view these resources as essential to their national interests and long-term development strategies. This creates a dynamic where both sides have strong incentives to assert control while managing escalation risks. The challenge lies in balancing legitimate national interests with regional stability requirements. This is where geopolitical reality becomes important, as resource development decisions now carry implications far beyond energy economics. The Philippines maintains several key security partnerships that significantly influence regional strategic calculations. The United States provides defense guarantees through mutual defense treaties and conducts regular freedom of navigation operations in disputed waters. Japan offers substantial maritime security assistance, including Coast Guard vessels and training programs. Australia provides defense cooperation and supports international maritime law enforcement. India maintains a growing strategic partnership focused on Indo-Pacific security and freedom of navigation. These partnerships create a complex strategic environment where bilateral disputes can have multilateral implications. Alliance commitments mean that tensions between China and the Philippines could potentially involve other major powers, though all parties generally prefer diplomatic solutions to military confrontation. However, this network of relationships also provides the Philippines with options and support that smaller nations might not possess when facing territorial disputes with larger neighbors. And this changes the equation significantly, as unilateral actions become more difficult when multiple stakeholders maintain interests in regional stability and international law compliance. Several pathways could emerge from this developing situation. The Philippines might proceed with systematic exploration activities, potentially partnering with international energy companies while maintaining diplomatic engagement with all regional stakeholders. Alternatively, competing parties might pursue joint development arrangements that acknowledge territorial disputes while enabling resource extraction. Such approaches have precedents in other regions where overlapping claims have been managed through cooperative frameworks. China could respond to Philippine exploration activities by increasing its own presence in disputed areas, leading to competitive positioning that raises escalation risks. However, both sides also have substantial incentives to avoid direct confrontation that could disrupt broader regional economic relationships. The Philippines faces complex strategic choices between asserting sovereign rights over potential energy resources and managing relationship stability with its largest trading partner and other regional stakeholders. These decisions will likely influence not only bilateral relationships but also broader precedents for resource development in disputed waters throughout the Indo-Pacific region. This brings us to a critical question about the long-term implications of this energy discovery. For the Philippines, potential oil reserves represent both significant opportunities and serious strategic challenges that will require careful navigation. Energy independence could strengthen economic development, reduce import dependence, and provide greater strategic autonomy in international relations. However, extracting these resources requires successfully managing complex territorial disputes and competing national interests. The broader regional implications extend beyond bilateral relationships. How this situation develops could establish important precedents for resource development in disputed waters throughout Asia. International stakeholders will be monitoring whether competing territorial claims can be managed through diplomatic mechanisms or whether resource competition leads to increased regional tensions. The decisions made in the coming months and years will likely influence not only Philippine energy security but also the broader balance of power in the South China Sea. Success in balancing legitimate national interests with regional stability requirements could provide a model for similar challenges elsewhere. Ultimately, who controls these resources may depend less on historical claims or military capabilities than on the ability of regional powers to develop cooperative frameworks that serve mutual interests while respecting international maritime law.